Hello and a very warm welcome to Raj Malhotra IAS. Today is Wednesday and we'll be taking up current affairs articles with respect to geography, environment and science and tech. My name is Madhusudan Reddy and let's begin with today's sessions. So before we start with today's session, I would like to give you a brief idea what we are going to deal in this session. Firstly, we'll be taking up the issues with respect to the power sector in India, and secondly, we'll also understand and try to look into the coal sector shortage, how it has spilled over onto the power sector, and thirdly, we'll also be looking into a new technology that the in principle approval, the Ministry of Forestry and Environment along with the mining department in conjugation, they have now said yes to a special type of drilling, that is your extended reach drilling. And lastly, we'll also look into some kind of some places which are in news, and then we'll look into some national parks which are in the news, as well as the state of Rajasthan national parks because of the forest fires. They are in news since last a month. We'll be looking into them in detail and in a comprehensive manner, right? And firstly, I would like to ask you a question. How is the weather at your place? So I am in Chandigarh and the weather here is rainy, and it is so much relieving that today's temperatures are calm. The temperatures are around 25 to 30 odd degrees, and it has given us so much of relief. So in this context, I would also try to interlink with today's weather as well as the power crisis along with the coal crisis. Let us look into all of this in detail. Firstly, there is an article in the Indian Express newspaper. There are also articles in other newspapers with regard to power crisis in India. And let me also know, are there any power cuts in your home, in your hometown? If there are any, for how long are they? So I see a comment, weather in Karnataka is too hot, and it's weather in Shimla it's raining. Okay, nice. Let's get back. See, the article here, it reads that how heat waves added to power demand amid coal shortages. Heat wave तो है, काफ़ी टाइम से चल रहा है heat wave. There is heat wave in the northwestern India and there is heat waves in the North India and some parts of eastern India. But there is some kind of respite in the southern part of the peninsular India. But since yesterday onwards, there has been some kind of respite with respect to these heat waves, and I hope this respite will also be there in the power sector as well. Okay, this article also reads that India is staring at a crisis again, this time induced by a deliberating fuel shortage. What kind of fuel it is? It is the coal. Agar coal ki shortage hai, and this has now spilled onto the other sectors like power, right? And it is said that 70% of India's power jo hai, it is dependent upon the coal. And if you have watched my last class, we have been discussing about the climate change. Are there any solutions to the climate change issues? काफ़ी pollution हो रहा था. We have also discussed about the pricing of the carbon. Can pricing of the carbon lead to the reduction in the climate change? Is climate change a solution? Those things which you have dealt in detail. Now this is something today what we are going to discuss is in conjugation with the last articles. We'll try to interlink with the carbon tapping potential also. We'll also try to interlink with the carbon tax and the current ongoing crisis. So before this, firstly I wanted to tell you that Ministry of Power has given a red alert. It said that India is going to face an intense power crisis in the coming months. Apart from that, the Delhi government, the Ministry of Power in the Delhi government said that they are only left with 1 day's coal that is sufficient to power the power plants in Delhi. Imagine if that coal raw material is if the coal raw material is finished, then in that case metros, hospitals and the day-to-day electricity run, anything that is dependent upon the electricity will come to a halt. Those people who can afford to generate electricity on their own, they can get onto generation. So coal being one of the important factor in generation of the power, we should now understand what is the role in coal with respect to power generation, for which I want you to look into this particular aspect. I would like you to be taken to the Ministry of Power website directly, and I would like to show you something which is important. Let us first look into some facts here. After looking into these facts, we'll now take up the issue of the coal and interlink with power. पहले facts check कर लेते, facts क्या है. See, when we open the Ministry of Power website, here when you go to the generation, you will have a small component, that is power sector at a glance. Here in the power sector at a glance, it will give you a complete picture of what is the state of power in India and from what are the sources in which we generate this power, right? Come, see, the Ministry of Power website, it is up to date. The Central Electricity Authority, it has given this data, and it is up to date data which the government of India gives. See, the total installed capacity as on 31st of March itself, it says that of the total installed capacity, if you look here, private sector owns around 49% of the total power in India. The power generation I am talking about. When it comes to central government, that is 24.6%, and when it comes to the state sector, it is only 26.2%. That means in India, the power generation is more done by the private sectors rather than the government in terms of state and center. But together, center and state government owns 51% of the total power that is being generated in India. So these are some of the areas where preliminary questions can be asked, right? So it is the private sector has somewhere around 49% and government combinedly owns 51%, in which private sector greater than your central government as well as then it is your state government, right? This is the order of descendants. Now if you look here, the installed capacity fuel wise, see, power can be generated from renewable sources as well as non-renewable sources. So a month back when Prime Minister of India went into the summits and told that by the year 2030 we are going to generate 50% of the total electricity in India by the renewable sources. So in this context, we will also look into the share of the renewable energy and also the share of non-renewable sources from which the power is generated. See, the ministry clearly states that installed generation capacity as on 31/3/2022, that is hardly a month before data. In this, if you look into the fossil fuels account for somewhere around, in the fossil fuels, the most of the fossil fuels that is used are your coal, lignite, third one is gas and diesel. These are the four major components your fossil fuel uses, and this fossil fuel generation accounts for 59.5%, right? This is from the non-renewable sources of energy. They are non-renewable sources of energy. That means the renewable sources of energy accounts for around 40%, right? That means in India, we generate more power using the fossil fuels rather than the non-renewable sources, that is your wind, hydro, solar or these kind of energies, right? And nextly, if you look into this composition again, coal accounts for somewhere around 50% of the total non-renewable sources of energy. Coal alone accounts, I am telling about the coal alone accounts for the 50% of the total energy. In fact, coal all in all accounts for 60%, around 60% of the total energy that is generated in India. That is the percentage of share which the coal accounts for. And when you look into the non-fossil fuel sources, here the non-fossil fuel sources which accounts for hydro, wind, solar, even in terms of nuclear, it says that hydro accounts for 11.7% and then wind and solar, whereas other energies accounts for 27.5%. See, there can be a question directly which can be asked in your preliminary examination, which of the following energy sources generate more power in the order of descendants or in the terms of in the order of precedence, they can be asked. So hydro accounts for 11.7% and it is wind, solar and other renewable sources of energy accounts for 27.5%, and wind is around only 10 odd percent. And if you think that nuclear accounts for how much percent, please comment down if you know. See, nuclear in India hardly accounts for 2% of the total power that is generated. So nuclear power generation capacity in India is only 2%. It is India mostly depends upon the coal for its power, right? Now, if the power generation of coal, that is through thermal power plants, if they are put at halt, 50% of the total power that is generated in India is also put at halt. Now those power plants which give power to the electricity driven railways, they can be put at halt. So overall it is a big sector which will impact the day-to-day life of an individual, right? This is something which is very much important, and from the preliminary point of view, please look here. And I would also like you to show some other graphs which have been given by the ministry here, and something very interesting that you will get to see, and the potential area of these questions can be asked is very high, whether in terms of mains or in terms of prelims. Let me get back to your PPT and show you that what are these graphs telling and where India should focus and what is the problem that is associated with the ongoing issue, right? See here, look at the graph. This is a graph which talks about the total generation including renewable energy sources since the 2009 से लेकर 2009 से लेकर आज तक the total generation of the power has been gradually increased. But if you see, the power generation back in 2009 was somewhere around 805 billion units था. ये हमेशा increase हुआ, but when it came to 2019 and 2020, it is almost stagnant, right? It is almost stagnant. And another interesting graph you get to see here is, when you map this graph with the total growth in generation, in terms of total growth, I am talking about the growth. This is the generation of power, kitna generate hua, this is the graph. Now kitna growth hua, this talks, the red color graph talks about how much growth has happened. In this, if you see, for the first time in the last 1 decade, there has been a negative growth in terms of the power generation in India. This is something very interesting. The kinds of questions that can be asked is high potential area. See here, first time in the last decade, right? Negative growth में चले गए हम लोग -0.52, and there has been a drastic drop from 5% से लेकर minus negative growth. This is because of various reasons. The first reason is the COVID itself. Back in 2019 and 2020, when there was COVID, the total requirement of the power has come down. Everyone was at their homes, and the consumption of electricity in terms of industries power has come down. When everyone was at home, the consumption was less, because of which the generation of power was also the power generation was also less. Because of this, what happened? The power sectors and the coal sectors which need to be mined, the mining took place. The mining also went little lower. Come back and see again. Let us compare. This coal issue was nothing new to India. The coal issue was there since last year also. October में भी coal issue था. Because of that coal issue, power generation was less. And now the power crisis has loomed up, and it is being surging again, and it has resurfaced. Now let us try to look into the details. What is the difference between the power crisis that was taking place in the year 2020 and the present condition? See, 2020 में when there was COVID, power consumption था, it came down, right? Now lockdown opened. Immediately after the opening of the lockdown, what happened? The generation capacity or the requirement and the demand supply mismatch हुआ था, and because of which this power that needs to be generated did not generate up to the demand which it required, right? All of a sudden in the month of October, what happened? October 2020 faced so much of crisis. October 2021 faced so much of crisis. See, if you see, look into the October 2021. Let's look here. October 2021 से लेकर, if you take up, this is the month of May 2022. So this is when the lockdown opened, right? Here demand surged, right? So coal production went up, but it could not meet the demand. Now there were some kind of supply issues. What are the supply issues? Immediately when the lockdown opened, demand increased, the supply did not meet, because this is the month of October, hardly after the months of monsoon. Monsoon में क्या होता है? Extraction of coal becomes very, very risky, and extraction of coal will not take place the way it takes place in the month of May, June and July. So May and June, July being summers, the demand for power will also be more. So there was a mismatch in the demand and supply. Now also there is a mismatch that is going to be taken place because of the demand and supply. These reasons we'll look into why there is a mismatch here. First, let us try to understand the reasons for the crisis in the back in 2021 and we'll now compare it with the 2022. Right? See, supply and demand did not mismatch because of the post-monsoon issue. Right? Post-monsoon issues tha. Right? This was the crisis that took place in 2021. Now come back, this is 2022. The government of India did not realize the need and the requirement of power and it failed to estimate the power requirements in the month of May, June and July. To this plight, there is a heat wave that took place here. Right? Heat wave until a month before, since a month, till yesterday also there is intense heat wave that you can see in the northern parts of country, right? Because of this heat wave, again the demand went up. How much demand was it? It was somewhere around 220 gigawatts. This was the highest energy till date India has ever used, and this is the demand that it is demanding in the month of March, April and May. Imagine at the end of the June when the summer will be at its peak, the demand will be more, and can India meet the demand of its electricity through its when there is coal crisis across the world? This is something, a question which can also be expected in terms of mains. Kyunki last week also we have been discussing about the carbon pricing. Jitne bhi amount of carbon you get out, what you get to see, there is some kind of pricing that is put out on the carbon. Now you are also putting the price on the carbon, at the same time you are also saying that coal shortage hai, coal ka production increase karo. When you increase the coal production, the amount of greenhouse gases that comes into the atmosphere will also increase. So there is a mismatch in terms of policy also, there is a mismatch in terms of the decision making also. There is a government that has failed to estimate the demand of power and supply. Now this is some crisis that is going to generate in the coming months, that is your June, July. Now see here, most of the India in the month of November and December, January, it is actually winter. In the months of winter, what happens is the power demand comes down. When the demand comes down, again the coal crisis can be stabilized, and there were coal crisis in various parts of the world also. India being the second largest consumer of coal, India being the second largest importer of the coal, and at the same time India is the fourth largest country in terms of the world in terms of its reserves. But India still imports its coal. India imports its coal from various parts of the world. Now when you look into the international relations, there is a war that is going on in Russia. So Russia being the second largest reserves across the world, now Russia ke upar there are some kind of sanctions because of which India is no longer in a position to import its coal from Russia. We import coal from Australia, we import coal from Indonesia. So these imports, there has been some kind of restrictions that have been put on, because of which the current crisis is expected to go till in the month of April, May, June, July, August and till September, October also. Only when the winter comes, it is estimated that winter will calm down the requirements of the power. Right? So back in the year 2021 kya hua? The winter came and finally the power supply has come down, because of which we got some kind of relief. But the government thought that the requirement of power will be the same as compared to the last year. Last year we were consuming the power around 206 gigawatts or somewhere around 300, around the billion units of 800 odd billion units. But now the mismatch is at a greater level what the government did not expect. Right? See here. So this is a stretch of around 6 months. So 6 months of power crisis India has only seen during the time of 1970s and 1980s. In spite of we being advanced so much, this is some kind of failure which the government is yet to see, and it is going to impact day-to-day individual life, whether it is in terms of administration, whether in terms of commutation, or in terms of your load shedding, or in terms of your economy, it will have some kind of rippling effect as well, right? Now, before we go any further, I wanted to discuss some basic facts about coal, what kind of coal is present in India, how much coal percentage we do use for the electricity generation, and at the same time the different types of coal, what type of coal in India is used for the electricity generation. See, look here, in India we generally use 4 different types of coals, and all the 4 different types of coals are present in India, but the major contributor, the high calorific value coal, is hardly present in the Kashmir, right? Firstly, there are 4 different types of coal. The first type of coal is your anthracite coal. In the anthracite coal, it accounts for 80 to 90% of the carbon, somewhere around 80 to 95% of the carbon will be present, and it is a high calorific value. That means the amount of coal you burn and the amount of energy you get in this, the energy is more, right? This type of coal is called anthracite coal, and this anthracite coal is hardly seen in India, that is particularly in Jammu and Kashmir only. Nowhere else in India we do find this type of coal, but this type of coal is costly. India has less in amount, and when you burn small amount of coal you get more energy, but this burning takes place in a very short span of time. So this is not used in the industry grade, it is only used in the initial stages of the industrial ignition. The second type of coal that you get to see is your bituminous. This bituminous coal has low levels of moisture. It is a very good quality of coal also, but as compared to the anthracite coal, this accounts for somewhere around 60 to 80% of the carbon content. Now, this is the type of coal India has, and this is the type of coal we consume in terms of generating electricity in India, and this is widely present in India. This is present in Jharkhand, Odisha, most of the Chota Nagpur plateau, and some parts of the Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh also, right? So this coal is not just used for power generation or thermal power plants, but it is also used for industry grade, right? ये industries में भी use किया जाता है. Now, if the power that is being used, if there is a crisis in this particular coal, this will also impact your industries. Industries will impact the indirect life of an individual. So it is going to be a big crisis that India is yet to see. Now, the third type of coal is your lignite, which carries around 40 to 45% of the carbon, but lignite coal is a good coal as compared to the peat type of coal. Peat is nothing but more or less, when you burn the wood, the left amount of the carbon, which is also considered to be a low grade carbon, and this low grade coal or low grade carbon coal, that type of carbon is your peat, and this lignite coal accounts for 40 to 55% of the carbon content in it, and it is brown in color. It do not have high calorific value as compared to the bituminous coal, but lignite coal also has its significance. At times when there is a crunch in the coal, what we do is we dig the lignite coal and we mix it with the bituminous coal in order to blend the coal, so that the generation of electricity is kept at an intact way, right? Where do we find this? We find this in Rajasthan. Most of the Rajasthan, especially in the desert region, something very interesting you get to see, the lignite. Along with this, you also find it in Tamil Nadu, the southern parts of the Tamil Nadu, and some parts of Assam as well. And the last type of coal is your peat coal. This peat coal has less carbon content in it, and it gives more moisture. That means when you burn, it gives more carbon, more soot. It will not be burnt properly, and it has very less usages, right? These are some of the basic elements which you have to understand before we go any further, right? Now let's get back into the power and as well as coal linkage. See, I have already told you the major reasons for the power crisis in India. So the first major crisis is your international relations. When you look from the international angle, Russia accounts for 17.6% of the total global coal reserves. Look here, India only accounts for 6.8%. Now the largest coal reserves in the world is held by USA. So USA has put sanctions on Russia because of the Russia-Ukraine war. तो यहाँ पे रशिया और यूक्रेन के बीच में वॉर चल रही थी, and apart from this, when there is a war condition, there is a pipeline linkage between Russia and Europe. that is called Nord Stream. So Europe is one of those countries which bears the flag for the climate change. Climate change हो रहा है, they ask you to not to consume the greenhouse gases or generate greenhouse gases. They ask us to consume less amount of coal and less amount of various types of fossil fuels, but Europe is now in no longer a position to use those renewable sources for its energy generation, because Nord Stream pipeline जो है जहाँ से रशिया से लेकर यूरोप के बीच में this gas used to be delivered to Europe, but because of the war now this Nord Stream pipeline has been stopped. So even Europe has to import its coal from various parts of the world, right? So there has been a crunch. Earlier, India used to import its coal from Australia, we used to import our coal from Indonesia. Now, the coal prices went up. For how? Around $50 to $100 was the ton price last year, now it went up to $215. It is almost 100% of the hike in terms of coal. Can all the coal power generating power plants bear this cost? Yes, there are some plants which can bear and there are some government plants which cannot bear. There is some kind of financial issues also that is yet to be seen, which will be surfaced in a month's time. We'll be discussing again. And with respect to the distribution companies also, those distribution companies which are set up across the coastline of India, mostly they used to import from Indonesia and Australia. Now that the coal which the Europe earlier is completely relied upon renewable sources for its energy with respect to nuclear as well as other renewable sources, they are now using coal for its generation. So the consumption of coal in Europe went up. Where are they buying the coal from? They are also buying the coal from your Australia, they are buying coal from China, they are also buying coal from USA. So the demand for coal went up. The generation with respect to coal went up, so there is a mismatch in supply, there is also mismatch in demand. The demand is more, the supply is less. These are some of the reasons why with respect to international relations, why India is facing coal crisis. So those power plants which are set up on the coastline, instead of importing from outside because it is too costly, they are now asking the Coal India Limited to get some coal and give me some coal. These are some of the reasons. Instead of they importing from foreign, now they are also relied upon the domestic material. So there is a pressure on the domestic content as well, domestic content of coal, because of which the other power generating power plants which they have to maintain reserves of somewhere around 25 to 30 days, it has now fallen down to 1, 2, 3 or 4 days. Delhi government yesterday came up and the day before yesterday came up and said they are only left with 1 day's power reserve. If this 1 day's power reserve is gone, imagine the plight of Delhi. And state owned sectors only account for 24 odd percent and government central and state accounts for 51%. So if all the private distribution companies are not in a position to pay their debts to the raw material, that is to your coal, imagine the crisis that is yet to be faced. Now I've told you there are some facts which you have to remember, and I've also already told about those facts, that is India is the second largest country in terms of importing. Along with that, the Ministry of Railways has decided that it will be dedicatedly giving 1 lakh wagons for the movement of the coal across the country so that the power crisis be met. This is something big. And I've also told about the rise in demand and the price fluctuations. These are some of the aspects which you have to remember with respect to the coal. Now let us see with respect to some kind of another important facts. कौन सा ऐसा state है जो largest reserves भी है, and the same state which has largest reserves is also facing the power crisis in terms of its generational capacity as well as PLF factor price. What is PLF factor price? ये भी है, we'll look into it as well. Now first let us see with respect to the power generation in India and the coal reserves. It is actually the Jharkhand which has the highest reserves of power in India. Next to Jharkhand, it is your Odisha and Chhattisgarh. That means the belt, the eastern belt in India has highest coal reserves, right? They should be maintaining some kind of coal reserves, but Now let me show you some other factors with respect to the fact which we have dealt previously. See, I'll be coming back to this slide again just to give you a factual data. I've shown you this, we'll be using these facts again, right? Let's come back to the factors as well. In India, there are 117 thermal power plants. Out of this, 108 thermal plants have declared that they are now running short of coal. This is the first threat that has been issued, or the warning you can call it, or the major reason you can call it. And secondly, the power demand is hitting record high due to economic recovery after COVID. Now let us also look into some kind of statistics. What are the demands and what are the power requirements? See, back in 2021 October November में क्या हुआ था? The demand is 124 billion units, but today it is 140 billion units is the requirement. It is just 6 months away. 6 months के बाद ही इतना demand rise हुआ. Now September में heavy rains था in 21, and the rain season is yet to be arrived, so that there will also be some kind of shortages. These are some things which has been detailedly talked about in the report that has been given. Now the third component is some imported coal based power plants are not in production due to high international prices of the coal. I have also told you why this prices have been risen, because Europe, which was earlier using more amount of renewable sources for its power generation, now they are dependent upon coal because of the Nord Stream pipeline which goes from Russia to Europe has been cut down. The gas is no longer supplied to Europe. That is one of the reason. And the third one being the poor financial performances of the DISCOM companies. The DISCOM companies are nothing but distribution companies. In the power sector, any power generating company will not be the same company which distributes, right? So distribution is some other company which takes or which gets in lot of investment, which is the costliest procedure of all the power source से लेकर power consumption की बीच में. It is the distribution companies which incur losses and which incur profits. So these distribution companies which has to pay the raw material, which has to raise the poles, which has to draw the lines, all these distribution companies are no longer in a position to pay their debts to the loans that they have taken. That is some of the issue. And now some states like Jharkhand, Maharashtra have large outstanding dues. I have already told you that in India it is the Jharkhand which has the highest mining capacity with respect to the coal, and it has highest reserves. Odisha and Chhattisgarh, these are the same three states you get to see when in terms of debt crisis mein they have got struck in, because of which the production capacity has been come down, right? And lastly, the railways has come into picture. They are not in a position to transport the amount of coal that need to be transported, because of which now they have said that 1 lakh additional wagons we are going to give. Now at what cost? They have already cancelled 7 to 10 passenger vehicles, and those wagons are now being used for the transportation of the coal, right? These are some of the important aspects which have been in the news with respect to the coal crisis. Along with this, we should also look into the solutions. What exactly are the solutions which are to be dealt upon? Apart from that, I have also told you there is some important term that is called plant load factor. ये plant load factor काफ़ी न्यूज़ में है. There can be direct questions on your preliminary examination with respect to plant load factor. क्या होता है? See, plant load factor is nothing but it is a it's a broad measure at a percentage where the highest production of the electricity of a particular power plant with respect to the current production unit. If you compare this is called the plant load factor. If it has to be defined, it is defined in a way that PLF, that is plant load factor, is a broad measure of power plant's output during the period compared to its maximum output, right? So imported thermal coal prices जो है, I've already told you 50 to 100 tons per year होते थे. Now they have rise to 225 tons now. Along with that, plant load factor, earlier it should be maintained at 56%. Now it is maintained at half of the percent which they have to be maintained, because of which the crisis is still persistent, right? Now let me also show you some other important aspects with respect to the coal, that is your solutions. Solution kya hai? How do we get out from this crisis? The immediate answer is no one knows. But the way ahead which you can write for the examination is that the railways has cancelled the passenger freight, and they are now running a dedicated freight corridors for the transportation of coal to be met, and the industries as well as domestic loads. Now in the month of June and July, what happens is that the demand for the power might come with respect to the agricultural sector. That is when the government is planning to stock it up, and as well as it is a demand which is being made that now we should also be bringing coal or the importing coal from Indonesia in an excessive manner. Not all power plants can actually bear those costs. It is the duty upon the state to come in, intervene into the picture and bring in the imports, and the discom companies should be given some kind of relief. For how much time? Maybe for a period of 6 to 8 months with respect to their debt payments. That is when they can procure more coal and they can maintain the reserves that are required for. Now the government is also trying to bring in more mines on stream to boost the supply. Along with that, the state run Coal India jo hai, which is the sole entity for mining in India with respect to coal, is also enhancing its potential to unleash the potential of the coal reserves in India. And lastly, the supplies have been tight with respect to the global prices. Along with that, when the peak power demand jo hai is expected to reach around in the mid of May to June, which is around 220 gigawatt. This 220 gigawatt we have already reached. The estimation is that now we are going to reach 225 or 226. In the month of September and October, the crisis will be more. So for which these are some of the solutions which have been discussed that can be used for our examination purpose, right? Now the next article is with respect to, there is a specialized drilling mechanism which the Ministry of Forestry and the Ministry of Mining has given an in principle approval. In principle approval means they have said yes, now let us look into the feasibility of the technology and extract the reserves which are present in the under the forest. Imagine there are some kind of oil fields under this forest. Will the Ministry of Forestry give you a permission to dig this oil within this forest? See, mostly India being one of the forefront leader in terms of bearing its flag for its climate change and in terms of carbon reduction, India will not give permissions for the extraction of fossil fuels under this forest, because there is flora, there is fauna which will be impacted. Along with that, the carbon that is emitted from a forest, matured forest, is more as compared to the carbon that is driven at the barren places. For this, there has been a new kind of technology. There has been an in principle approval which has been given. That is, this particular technology is called the extended reach drilling. So extended reach drilling के लिए in principle approval किया गया था. Let us now look into the definition of what is extended reach drilling. क्या होता है? Imagine this is your forest area, right? And there is huge potential for reserves in this area. Maybe there kind of many minerals, oil reserves that are present within this soil underneath. So extended drilling is nothing but, instead of you going and drilling here or setting up your drilling machines here, which will distract the flora and fauna, what you will do is, instead of digging here, you will set up your oil drill plants here, and from here under the ground you will grow horizontally and you will explore the area underneath. This is called extended reach drilling. This is something which the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Forestry has given an in principle approval. Now this extraction plant जो है where it should be set up. The question is, can it be set up near to the protected areas? Can it be set up in the villages? Can it be set up in the cities? The answer is, it is said that at least 1 kilometer from the protected area होना चाहिए. 1 kilometer from the protected area, and if there are any villages, there should be 0.5 kilometer, that is 500 meters away from the village, where there is extraction plant that need to be set up, and this extraction plant will go horizontally and extract underneath. So this is nothing but horizontal drilling भी कहा जाता है, right? This particular type of extraction is now being given licenses in India. So the question that can be asked with respect to this article is that this extended reach drilling can directly be asked in your examinations, or else they can be asked the implications of this technology, or especially if this was in news with respect to the Nilgiri forest. Nilgiri forest के अंदर it is estimated that there are some kind of reserves. KG basin में भी कुछ ऐसे reserves है. Earlier there has been a proposal for extracting of this particular reserves of oil, but the permission during 2009 से लेकर 2015 तक they have not been given. Today, that means in the last 1 week they have said yes to this particular type of extraction, right? With respect to literature, let me quickly read the definition for your ERD, that is extended reach drilling. See, extended reach drilling is nothing but a method of extraction that will involve digging of a horizontal well. That will involve a digging of a horizontal well at an inclination or some angles, and at least this should be twice the length of the depth, right? This is something which is given in your times of definition, right? Now the Director General of the Hydrocarbons जो है, this Director General of the Hydrocarbon has proposed that 1 kilometer दूरी होना चाहिए outside the protected areas and away from the villages and forestry areas, that is half a kilometer away from the forested areas, right? Okay, sorry, half a kilometer. Now, is this technique completely environmental friendly? The answer is also no again. See, it is an environmental friendly method which can be extracted, but it will have some kind of positive implications as well as negative implications as well. In the positive implications, if you see, there is no direct impact on the fauna or flora, but in terms of negative implications, there can be leakages of that oil in the forest area, which can lead to the suffocation of animals, and the in and around area that of the forest ground soil contamination bhi ho sakta hai, and at the same time reproductive disorders can also be found. Reproductive disorders, you can ask me how, sir? Because when the oil that is extracted and falls onto the ground, it is the animals that are dependent upon the flora and fauna can also get impacted over a period of time. The next generation of animals you get to see, it is said that the report says that reproductive disorders are something which you get to see. That is what it is written on your slides, right? Now the next article, see, this is a representative image of how extraction will be done in terms of ERD technology. They'll set up a drilling machine here, that is drilling plant here. From there they'll go horizontally, and imagine this is the thick forest. If you extract here, there can be a environmental damage, for which you go horizontal drilling and you extract this from the inside. This is called ERD technology. Next, this technology is not just used in areas where there is environmental implications, there can also be residential problems. See, in terms of residential areas also, you can actually go in the desired pathway, locational pathway also. You can actually target an area and extract those minerals, right? And the next article with respect to the mapping point of view, or with respect to the environmental species point of view, Hindu newspaper has given this picture. It said that the sanctuary in Rajasthan, it is said that because of the intense heat wave, there is some kind of reproductive disorders that they have seen here. In this context, what we have to look is where exactly this Talchapar sanctuaries in Rajasthan is present. Sorry, This is present in Rajasthan, and where exactly is it present? It is present next to a national park. Which national park? If you know, please comment down in the comment section. So in this context also, it is important for us to look into the national parks of Rajasthan. See, the national parks of Rajasthan are mainly one, the desert national park, which is west of the Aravallis. This is your Aravallis. Okay? West of Aravallis is desert national park, and the end of the Aravallis you get to see Sariska, right? In the end of the Aravallis, that is the northern part of the Aravallis, and on the eastern side of the Aravallis, that is Keoladev, Bharatpur sanctuary, which you get to see. This is also a national park where tigers population keeps on moving from Sariska to Keoladev as well. Keoladev, here you also see some kind of bird sanctuaries, very species that are non-native to India. They come fly from the Central Asia, especially to the Keoladev, Bharatpur bird sanctuary. And other sanctuaries which are very famous for tigers are your Ranthambore National Park and Dara reserves. These are some things which are in your news with respect to the national parks. Recently, the Ranthambore forest as well as Sariska forest had forest fires, right? They were in news with respect to forest fires also, right? This is what you get to see in the previous 1 week with respect to geography and environment. I hope we have added some value to your preparation. If you do also think so, please subscribe to this channel, and whenever we come up with the quality content to you, you will be notified. And thank you for giving this opportunity. See you on next Wednesday. If you have any doubts, you can post your doubts in the comment section. We'll be coming up and addressing you. And if at all you want to ask other doubts, you can directly message me. This is my contact number. Right? Any doubt with respect to the topics that have been dealt here, you can message me. We at Raj Malhotra are always open for your doubts to be resolved. Thank you and take care.